You know, some true stories are just so wild, you'd almost think they were made up for a movie. Well, this is one of them. It's the absolutely astonishing story of a spy who managed to troll the entire Nazi high command, and he did it with pretty much nothing but his own imagination.
Okay, think about D-Day for a second. It was the biggest seaborne invasion in the history of the world, and it was the moment that really turned the tide of World War II. But the whole thing, its entire success, depended on one critical thing: surprise. When the Allies hit the beaches of Normandy, the Germans were looking the other way, literally defending a spot 150 miles away. So how on earth did that happen?
Well, the answer is just, it's almost hard to believe. The person who tricked Hitler, the person who saved countless lives, wasn't some suave, seasoned secret agent. He was a chicken farmer, a guy from Barcelona with absolutely zero experience in spying, but who had an imagination so powerful it literally changed history. So our story doesn't start in some smoky back room at MI5. Nope. It starts on a farm in Spain with a man named Juan Pujol Garcia. And his journey from civilian to super spy wasn't about fame or fortune. It was driven by a deep personal conviction that was forged during his country's own brutal civil war. See, before World War II even kicked off, Pujol had already seen the horrors of extremism up close during the Spanish Civil War. He was forced to fight, his farm was taken, his family was put in danger. He came to despise the fanaticism he saw on both sides. So when the Nazis started marching across Europe, he just knew he couldn't stand by and do nothing. So he came up with this plan, and it was audacious, to say the least. First, he walked into the British embassy in Madrid and offered to be a spy. And they looked at this chicken farmer and basically said, no thanks. They turned him away flat. Now, most people would have just given up, but not Pujol. He figured, okay, if the British won't hire me to spy on the Germans, I'll get the Germans to hire me, and then I'll just make stuff up. And this, right here, is where the story goes from unbelievable to completely bonkers. The Germans actually hired him. They gave him cash, a code book, and told him to go to London and build a spy network. Instead, Pujol moves to Portugal, sets himself up in a local library, and starts his new career as Germany's top spy in Britain. Get this, he never even set foot in the country. He's sitting at a desk in Lisbon, and with just a tourist map of Britain, a travel guide, and his own incredible imagination, he starts writing these incredibly detailed reports. He'd mix in some plausible-sounding military info with really mundane personal details, like complaining about the weather, to make it all sound real. But he didn't stop there. To make his report seem more credible, he invented an entire network of sub-agents, 27 of them. Each one had a name, a detailed backstory, even family problems. It was a brilliant system because if the Germans ever questioned one of his reports, he could just blame it on one of his imaginary spies making a mistake. It was a self-correcting web of lies. And the Germans? They bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. They were so impressed, they started sending him what would be, in today's money, $11,000 a month. All to pay for a spy network that was completely 100% made up. Now, Pujol's fake operation was so convincing that, ironically, he ended up on the radar of the very same people who had rejected him, British intelligence. But they weren't looking for a German spy. They were hunting for this elaborate hoax that was somehow working in their favor. So how did they finally get a lead? Well, British codebreakers were intercepting his messages, and they launched this massive manhunt for this phantom spy ring, but kept coming up empty. The big breakthrough came from one tiny, almost silly detail in a report from his fake agent up in Glasgow. A report from Glasgow mentioned that people there would do anything for a liter of wine. Now, that set off all sorts of alarm bells for the British. First, that just wasn't the local drinking culture. But the real smoking gun was the word liter. Britain used the imperial system, pints and gallons, not metric. That one word was the clue that told them whoever was writing these reports had never, ever been to the UK. So MI5 realized this guy was single-handedly tying up German intelligence, sending them on these wild goose chases. And they weren't mad, they were impressed. They were so blown away by his natural talent for deception that they tracked him down, brought him to London for real this time, and officially made him a double agent. They gave him the code named Garbo because they said he was the greatest actor in the world. So now, with access to real information, Garbo's lies became even more powerful.
For the Allied invasion of North Africa, he sent the Germans a letter detailing the entire attack plan, every single correct detail. But, and this is the genius part, he cleverly had it postmarked so it would arrive one day after the invasion had already started. The Germans weren't even mad. They were amazed. Their response basically cemented their absolute trust in him.
Okay, so everything that's happened so far, that was all just the warm-up act. Now we get to Garbo's masterpiece, his starring role in Operation Fortitude, the massive, complex deception plan to hide the real location of the D-Day landings. The whole goal was to convince the Germans that the main Allied invasion was going to happen at Pas de Calais, the shortest point across the English Channel. So Garbo fed them a constant stream of reports about this massive, but totally fictional, army gathering in southeast England. And to back him up, the Allies built a literal ghost army, inflatable tanks, wooden airplanes, and fake radio chatter. It was a massive piece of military theater. So, the ultimate proof that it all worked? It came from Hitler himself. The British intercepted a message where he told the Japanese ambassador that the landings at Normandy were just a trick, a diversion. He was totally convinced that the real attack, the one Garbo had been telling him about for months, was still coming at Calais. Garbo's lies had made it all the way to Hitler's desk, and he believed every single word. And because Hitler kept his best tank divisions waiting in Calais for an invasion that was never going to happen, the Allied forces who landed in Normandy faced way less resistance. They outnumbered the defenders 3-1. Garbo's fictional army saved thousands of real lives. It's just incredible. After the war, Garbo's story takes yet another bizarre twist. His contribution was so unique, so completely strange, that he managed to achieve something no other spy ever has. He is the only person in World War II to be decorated by both sides. The Germans gave him the Iron Cross for his brilliant intelligence work, a medal that Hitler himself had to personally approve, and at the exact same time, the British made him an officer of the Order of the British Empire for his incredible service to the Allies. Of course, after the war, he was terrified that surviving Nazis would come looking for revenge. So Pujol had to disappear. With some help from MI5, he faked his own death from malaria in Africa and moved to Venezuela. He lived there in total anonymity for nearly 40 years, just running a small gift shop. His story was almost lost forever, until one historian just refused to give up the search. In 1984, the world finally rediscovered Juan Pujol Garcia. They brought him back to Europe for the 40th anniversary of D-Day. And as he stood there in the American cemetery at Normandy, looking at the rows and rows of graves, he finally understood the true weight of what he had done. He just broke down and wept. And that really just leaves us with one last thought. Garbo's story is just such a testament to human ingenuity. This guy operated with a map, a travel guide, and his own creativity. It really makes you wonder, in our world today, with all the satellites and data and AI, could one person's imagination still change the course of history?
Follow and subscribe.